Last time, we finished up our summary queries, and I wanted to bring up this page of OneNote notes. So I thought maybe you would want to add this information to your OneNote notebook. So it should be on the Zoom. Try to get it. You can see it all, but yet it's not tiny. So last week, our chapter was about aggregate functions. Remember, those functions are just the same as upcoding a function. They were just pre-written and are part of SQL. And we saw that we could use the functions to summarize data to return one column. These aggregate functions can also be called column functions or columnar functions, kind of depending on what source you're looking at. Our book calls them aggregate functions, but you can see that other name. We saw any query that uses those functions as a summary query. The count function, super important. The all, if we put that inside the parentheses, includes all the selected values. Distinct inside our parentheses would not count duplicates. The star counts all the rows that are processed. And the count does include null values. So if I do a count on some total field, it's going to count that even if it doesn't have valid data in it. All of the other select statements that we've been doing so far that weren't aggregate queries has been scalar. So scalar just means all of those single rows that like we've been doing. So luckily they didn't give us that name first until it had meaning when we were comparing it to aggregate. We saw that the group by clause is an aggregate clause. It usually comes after the where and before the order by. It specifies columns for us to group on. And so it'll be a list of individual columns. If we want to select specific groups based on their properties, we can use the having clause. So the having specifies criteria for our groups. And then at the very end of the chapter, we saw with rollup gives us totals and subtotals. And with cube gives us subtotals and final totals. And grouping sets allow us to have some really complicated additional layers of grouping. My friend that works down the road in Monette, her title is like SQL reports administrator or something like that. So I mean, she spends every day writing SQL code. That's what she does. She makes a ton of money. She said she's never used the grouping sets. That's not something that she's ever done. So sometimes we see code that isn't widely used. Bless you. Goodness. Thank you. That dust in here. A couple of other things that I copied into my notes. If you remember last week, at the beginning of the week, I Googled pictures of the summary report, and I just snipped one of those in to my OneNote to kind of remind me what I'm thinking about here with aggregate functions, that I'm thinking about creating reports like that. And then I also copied in a little bit from the PowerPoint about the syntax and the order of the select statement. Sure, sorry. Moved it around on you. Whenever we're using group by,